What's up, everybody? This is Zach with the Nerd Cave Network, and I'm joined along with
Jeremy Branch of Be Terrible Movies on YouTube. What's up, everybody?
Jeremy. Thanks for coming by.
Glad to
We
be here.
just got out of the movie theater.
We're like marinating on it right now.
Yeah, this is kind of like one of those conversations you stay in the parking lot for 30 and 40 minutes after the movie with your friends, and you talk about the movie. And the movie we're talking about is X-Men Apocalypse. Just came out, new Bryan Singer X-Men movie. What are your thoughts on it?
So is it the 7th X-Men movie?
Are we counting Wolverine, all the Wolverines in there?
So this is the 6th actual X-Men movie, not counting Deadpool, not counting Wolverine. And I would
Both
say,
Wolverines? Or
I think there's a total of 9. We've got Singer's 2, and then Ratner's.
That's
That's
3.
X1 through 3. And
Yeah.
then we've got First Class, Days of Future Past, and Apocalypse. And then we've got 2 Wolverine movies
And
and,
then
maybe a Deadpool movie.
yeah, and Deadpool's still the best out of all of them, in
Yeah.
my opinion.
And as far as X-Men movies go, I have kind of 2 different conflicting thoughts about it coming right out of the movie. It had the most fanfare out of any X-Men movies I've seen. It felt the most like a page-to-movie adaptation of an X-Men. But I did feel like it's very, very self-serious, and it goes the direction of just full, utter destruction of the entire world for like the last 45 minutes.
Yeah, the thing, like, it was very serious. It wasn't like Batman versus Superman serious.
No.
But it would have these awkward moments of trying to be funny at times.
Some of them worked,
Some of them hit. Some of them hit really well, and then some of them were just like,
not so much.
can we go back and try that one more take? If
Oh,
it was
yeah.
maybe one more take, it might hit a little bit more. Just like the Charles Xavier, like being into
Moria or whatever.
yeah, Myra. I think this is Myra, and it was just kind of like, all right. So overall, I enjoyed the movie. I thought it was a good movie. Just some pacing. It was pretty good on the pacing. It just felt a little weird here and there. Some things felt very cheesy, like special effects wise. One thing, you kind of mentioned this, that you wish you would have seen more about Apocalypse. I can't remember how you stated it. You said you wanted to see more of him doing something.
Yeah. His skills, his powers didn't seem very well defined.
Yeah, it was it was very fluid. It was like whatever fit the situation, that's what he could do. One thing that watching the movie, the very beginning of it, you see Apocalypse and his 4 horsemen, the original 4 horsemen, I'm assuming, going into this temple to him to take another form because he is aged and everything. And I really wanted to see more of how Apocalypse set up this whole civilization to worship him. I thought that would have been a much cooler movie.
That opening scene was fantastic.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. It looked cool. The original 4 Horsemen, I would love to just see a movie about them.
I'm with you, man. That's a good call.
But not taking away from the movie. It was a lot better than I expected because going in, there was like people that this is worse than Batman versus Superman, which I still love Batman versus Superman. You can check that review out here. But what are some other thoughts you had on that?
Well, and one thing that I felt like I wish they would have capitalized on is the 1980s setting. First Class did a really good job of letting you feel like you're in a 60s spy thriller. It was like a Bond throwback. And then we get Days of Future Past, and it's got this really iconic 70s flavor to it, the way Wolverine dresses. And don't get me wrong, the costumes were true to the 80s period, but I wish we could have went with the gang to the mall. Like, I wanted to see the mall. I wanted to see some arcades. I wanted to feel like I was in the 1980s.
You missed it a little bit earlier on, which they actually went and saw Return of the Jedi, and they made
I was
a
pissing for that.
they were making a joke that they were like, oh well, you know, Empire's the better one, and then Scott made the statement that, well, if without the first one, then you would have, you know, wouldn't have been able to be here. And then Gene made the joke, well, you know, the third one's always the worst, making a stab at X3 being the worst of the original 3, which I thought was hilarious.
There were a couple, now that I say it was a serious tone, there were a couple of lighthearted moments in it. There were a couple of in-jokes for fans of the X-Men, and I did enjoy that. I mentioned it in my Days of Future Past review. I think my fanboyism is one of the biggest problems that I've ever had with this franchise, and I didn't like the portrayal of Archangel in Apocalypse. I felt like the Four Horsemen should have had more pivotal roles. They were kind of all sidelined, except for Eric, which obviously he's been a standout.
And I think that you bringing that up, it was very apparent that these were just B-roll, like characters. There was nothing. You didn't get much backstory other than you got more on Storm than anything. You got a little bit more on Archangel, and then Cyclops was just there. And I think they really underutilized Olivia Munn.
She was just there to look hot and kind of resting bitch face from the side of the shot in a lot of shots. And it was also kind of funny that at one point Apocalypse is like melding this fantastic armor for Archangel and for Magneto, and then like Psylocke gets this slutty little one piece.
Yeah, with like thigh-high like
not gonna
boots.
protect you much, but you look good. You look good.
And I'm glad that they went with the original, like Psylocke costume and everything. It's just I wish they would have done more. And seeing Storm as a bad guy, like her motivations and everything, a little thin but still interesting. But seeing the change at the end, so. I don't know how far you want to get into spoilers here or anything before we get into that. What are some other things that you thought about in the movie?
At 2.5 hours, it still felt rushed at certain times. There were action sequences that went on maybe a little longer than they should have, at the risk of like fleshing out some of these new important X-Men. Storm,
Jubilee.
Yeah, does she get, like you said, maybe one line in the movie?
She might met 1, 2, maybe 3.
Psylocke might have had 3 lines. Storm maybe had like 10 lines through the entire movie. But I did feel like they really nailed Jean, they really nailed Nightcrawler, and they really nailed Cyclops. And I like to see that. I like this new X-Men.
Yeah.
I don't know how Sansa Stark is going to age into Famke Janssen, but whatever. That's just a little nitpicky shit.
Hey, I don't mind. I like both of them.
Sure, me too.
But going back to it, the 80s stuff, they kind of peppered it in there. It was like a shotgun full of 80s that are like, all right, let's make an X-Men movie in the 80s. Poosh. And that was about all they did. They didn't have a spattering. They're like, oh, this is Miss Pac-Man. Here's Knight Rider in the background. And here's a picture of Ronald Reagan.
Yeah.
And the Cold War. The Cold War is still going on here. And I'm just letting y'all know. But overall, I think the movie was pretty interesting. Of course, it is not even close to what Civil War is.
No.
It's kind of like the redheaded step youngin' of of somebody. There's the X-Men over there, and then here's Marvel, and here's DC, but X-Men's over there, and then Deadpool's on his own pedestal all by himself. But you were talking about Apocalypse, and you had a pretty bold statement on him.
I didn't enjoy him at all. And this is from a guy who probably would say Ex Machina was my favorite movie of 2015. I loved him as Poe Dameron. Inside Llewyn Davis, this is somebody who I've really followed their career and enjoy them as an actor. And buried behind the very Ivan Ooze-esque prosthetics and makeup, I just felt like some of the nuances of who he is as an actor got lost in it. And I felt like Bryan Singer, he's clever as a filmmaker. He does some very good, like, creative choices to bring the X-Men to life, but I feel like he could have played Apocalypse a little more in the shadows and given him a little more horror-esque introduction instead of just, here's Apocalypse, this is what he looks like. Just obscure him in the shadows, make him a little bit darker, sinister of a figure, instead of just trotting him out from the beginning.
Well, it's, even with Kylo Ren, you still had that kind of, okay, well, who is this guy throughout the whole thing? You got to see glimpses of his characteristics, that he's super powerful, that he's this rage machine, but you didn't get all of it all at once. It was kind of spilled out throughout The Force Awakens, and I think he did a pretty good job as Apocalypse, but I don't think he was given much to go on.
That's a great point. There's not any character development. He starts off as the same character he ends as, and you don't get like little revelations throughout it, like you were saying, about his actual history, where he came from. Why does he need the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse if his mutant power is something like he can put you into a wall or into the floor? That's what I got.
The coolest scene is when he first comes out of the tomb and those 3 guys come up and he just uses sand to just cut their heads. I was just like, oh, that is freaking awesome.
It was awesome. It was awesome. And I'm so glad you brought that up. I guess I'll issue a spoiler warning right now because there is a really iconic scene. I'm going to just blow all the bag right now, but Weapon X shows up. Wolverine shows up in a cameo.
God, that was so cool.
We finally get to see Wolverine slice and dice, and there's a great scene in X2 in the mansion. But this one, actually, we get to see some visceral, like, bloodshed.
Yeah, like splattering and everything. And that was super cool because we've never seen him escape.
Yeah.
You know, it's always in the comics. There was I want to say it was in a video game at one point, you know, but you get to see that, and you see Wolverine where he is just, like I said, berserk mode. It's not Logan, it's not anything like that. He's not trying to protect the world. He is just killing people because they mess with him.
Yeah.
And you pointed out, you're like, I'm glad to finally see blood. That was so cool.
It matters because his claws always stayed so shiny in all the other movies. And I'm like, he's impaling people.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. And like they were showing like the blood splatter and everything, but on his claws they were still pretty clean.
Yeah, this is true.
I'm just like, just commit.
I want to see some bloody knuckles, even. You know what I mean? Like where he's got it on his hands because you would.
When he reeled him in, he had blood on his hands, but like the whole time they were pretty shiny. At least they didn't look fake like Wolverine Origins.
They were better in this one, right?
Yeah, they were much better. God, that movie. Oh, so I have hope for the last Wolverine movie. Like seeing that, I think the last Wolverine movie is going to be a lot gorier. Did you ever play the X-Men Wolverine game?
No, I can't say I did.
Okay, there was a X-Men Wolverine Origin game. One of the best superhero games. It was so gory. It was not the greatest story-wise, but it was super gory and getting to fight with Wolverine and everything. Of course, it followed the really bad story from that movie, but it was still a really fun game to get and level Wolverine up and everything.
And to me, it's like, it doesn't have to be gory to be good, but Wolverine is one of those characters that truly does lend himself to that kind of material. I mean, if Deadpool deserves and merits an R rating, Wolverine does. And a lot of these mutants always have seen their powers as kind of a gift and a curse at different times, especially when they're going through puberty. They don't know exactly how to deal with their powers.
Yeah.
And what I've always found about Wolverine's powers is he's just a killing machine. He doesn't have like a gift. He can just take an ass whooping and dish out an ass whooping like nobody's business.
Yeah.
And that's what Wolverine does. And that's what I think how he does the best in the X-Men. And that's why it was just awesome to see that version of him, because you nailed it. We've seen a cool collective version of Wolverine through Hugh Jackman's portrayal. And finally, we get to see like what the experimentation of the Weapon X project did to him psychologically.
Yeah.
We also get to see a little bloom of the potential relationship with Jean Grey and his feelings for her.
Yeah, and I'm glad that they planted that seed.
So small.
Yeah, it was just a little right there, and that was cool. You brought up this point that the mutant powers are usually tied to like when someone's a teenager, that turmoil of the tumultuous time of being a teenager with your hormones, everything that a normal human being goes through.
Absolutely.
And then you put in, okay, you also have superpowers that could kill someone. That's really hard to deal with. And I think they did a pretty good job with Jean Grey and Scott dealing with their powers and how they interact with other people. And it was interesting seeing Jean Grey be the outcast of the school instead of being someone that everyone looks up to.
Absolutely. Everybody was terrified of her because she was just learning to utilize her powers. And that's a great point, man. And also, because Cyclops and Jean Grey, more times than not, were the leaders of the X-Men, it was really cool to see why. I think this movie portrayed their powers better than we'd ever seen them before, to make you know, like, wow, you do not want to mess with Cyclops or Jean Grey. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it was just I'm not going to hit the end scene yet, but that end scene was amazing.
Absolutely.
I'm ready for Mystique to ride off into the sunset.
I was going to ask you about that, how you felt about Jennifer Lawrence continuing to get a larger role in each of the movies.
It just doesn't fit her. Like, she does a great job as Mystique, but Mystique is not a powerful character. She, of course, has a relationship with both Professor X and Magneto, but they are not, you know, those are the two most powerful mutants. She's just a friend, you know?
She also became Katniss Everdeen, which is one of the top grossing franchises of all time. So the studios did what studios would do, and they inflated her role. And you're right, she was never it's from my history of the X-Men, she was never an X-Man. I mean, she was always in the X-Men comics, but she was never an actual core member of the team. She was always like
the Brotherhood. Like, she was always on the bad side.
Absolutely. And I do think that they kind of turned her into a Katniss Everdeen type in this movie with all her talk of war and that stuff.
It just kind of felt weird and out of place, like when she's trying to fight Apocalypse and everything.
Yeah.
I'm just
what
like,
are you gonna do? Transform into somebody else?
Like, oh, I'm Apocalypse. Oh, you're confused, aren't you? You're seeing double. So that I think she was the weaker character of it all out of the main three from the other two movies. In the last movie, I thought she had really good reason to be in the movie, motivation. Trask, love that character in that, being, you know, needing her cells to be able to mimic the other powers and everything for the Sentinels. That was a really cool thing. But in this movie, it just felt a little, okay, she's this person that gets mutants. Okay, that's cool. Don't make her a main character.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's another thing that Days of Future Past did so well, is take all of these characters. I mean, a massive ensemble.
And freaking Bishop in there.
Yeah, everybody's in it, and somehow they still managed to keep it all working organically. This movie suffers from having way too many characters and nothing to do with most of them. God, this movie is strong when it's dealing with Magneto through the beginning of the movie, and he's just such a great character. But then I felt that his motivations rang a lot less true towards the end. He just turned into a flip-flopper for no good reason. Like, I get why he was pissed. There's a real good catalyst for what makes him go over the edge. But then after that, I just felt like he didn't really say anything.
Yeah, I think, you know, his story and why he went over with Apocalypse, great. Great storytelling. I wish Quicksilver would have revealed his, you know, true identity and everything. That would have made it more believable for him to switch and everything. Getting to see seeing his son being, you know, trapped and his leg being broken and he's fixing to be killed and everything, that would have been a lot more believable than him just like, oh, my friends that I don't care anything about.
Do you think that is your takeaway, that he did know even if he wasn't told?
I think in his mind he might, you know, this might be, but I think it's more about Charles and Raven than Quicksilver at this point. Nightcrawler, I think they did a really good job with him.
One of my favorite characters in the movie.
I'm just glad that they brought him back since he was only in X3, so I'm glad he's back.
I miss Juggernaut, personally.
Yeah. Juggernaut in Deadpool was, no, that's not Juggernaut, that's Colossus.
Yeah, he was great.
But the whole movie overall, I thought it was pretty enjoyable. It wasn't awful. It suffers from a lot of the same problems that many of the superhero movies are suffering from now. They're like, okay, well, we got to be bigger. We got to put more people in this. We got to have more and more people. More superheroes mean more money. And I think that's what the balancing act just didn't happen here. So, and
I agree, man. Obviously, nobody sets out to make a bad movie, and I don't think by any means this is a bad movie. I do think that I echo a lot of what you said. It feels like Bryan Singer just felt like he had to put in everything but the kitchen sink in this movie. It felt a little Transformers-esque at the end of the movie with all of the mass scale destruction. And I agree. I'm of the school of thought that less is more, and that's why I think series like Daredevil and Jessica Jones work so well, is because they sidestep all of that into the world shit that we have to see in every single superhero
I was
movie.
actually thinking of that in the movie. I was like, when are people going to get tired of seeing, oh, well, the world's going to end because of this event? And that's what we see all the time.
Every single time.
Every movie, it's, oh, the world's ending. They're going to kill everybody. And yeah, it was cool because Apocalypse has done this several times. He'll cultivate everything, and when it starts going to crap, he'll cleanse the earth and everything. And that's cool. I just think they went around that just a little weird. Still in spoiler territory here, the end where they defeat Apocalypse. What do you think? What did you think of that moment?
To be honest, man, it didn't really move me all that much. As far as I never subscribed to the thought that Apocalypse was an unstoppable force. I mean, all of these movies kind of, you know where they're headed. And it was cool, again, to see all of their powers unleashed. And I think the thing that we're skirting around right now is to see the full potential of Jean's powers and to see the Phoenix unleashed. It gives you an idea about probably where the series is heading, I think, from this point forward.
I think it was really cool. I think, getting that just quick glance of it. And when Apocalypse, he's like, the truth is revealed or the future is revealed. I thought that was really
good point.
Really good point. And even getting to see the Phoenix up in front, right behind Jean Grey and everything. I think the series is definitely going in a good direction.
Yeah.
But they need to figure out how to handle so many characters better. They did it amazing in Days of Future Past, just like you said. And even in First Class, they juggled a lot of characters really well there. You just got to do it the right way from now on. And the end scene after the credits, we're in the war room or danger room, I can't remember which one it's called, seeing them in the 90s style suits, getting to see Cyclops with like the X-Men badge with like the it was just so cool, and seeing his visor lighting up and everything.
That
was
fantastic.
Freaking awesome. That was probably one of my favorite parts of the whole movie, is seeing what's going to happen next.
The departure of Eric from the mansion was cool. The little conversation that he had with Charles, I thought that meant a lot, because I've always liked the relationship and the exploration of how they can be best friends and arch enemies at the same time. That's fantastic. One thing I will say is I would like to see some fresh blood in the franchise. Obviously, don't bring Brett Ratner back, but if you could bring like Matthew Vaughn back or something like that, because I find Bryan Singer, he's got a very somber approach, and you can tell he respects the source material.
Yeah.
He wants to bring it to. He's real heavy-handed with the parallels between the disenfranchised, minorities, and mutants. He's always been that guy. Matthew Vaughn took a kind of more goofy, kind of fun approach to it, I thought, and I liked that. I would like to see it go in a direction that's a little less self-serious, and hopefully find a place where we don't have to have end-of-the-world stakes at the end of it.
Who's the gentleman that directed Iron Man and Jungle Book?
Favreau. Jon Favreau.
He would be my pick for the X-Men, to head the next one, because he does such a good job with a lot of computer-generated stuff, and he creates characters that are interesting. And that's something that they need to do from now on, is have those interesting characters and make it a little bit smaller scale. You don't have to have End of the World. And I'm curious to see, you brought up the relationship between Eric and Professor X. That's always been, even when the original ones, you could see that they respect each other, and that they would never cross the line of killing each other.
Yeah.
And when that happened in X3, you could see Magneto just like, what the crap have I done?
Yeah.
So seeing that relationship being formed since First Class and seeing it continue here is really good.
That's a great point, man. Absolutely. I think that's kind of been the thing that's kept me coming back, regardless if it was Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen or if it was Michael Fassbender and James McAvoy. So they did really good casting.
One thing that I did think of, wish Michael Fassbender was going to be the next Wolverine. He would do a really good job.
Yeah, I could see that.
I was thinking that. I was like, dang, I wish he could be Wolverine, because that would be awesome.
In an alternate timeline.
Yep. But I say go watch the movie if you're an X-Men fan, or if you're a comic book fan. It's definitely worth the price of entry. I enjoyed it. Not the greatest movie ever. It's definitely not a Manchurian Candidate or anything like that, but it's a fun ride.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree, man. On a scale of 1 to 5, what would you give it for my sake?
I don't like to give 5.
Fine, I'm going to. I echo a lot of what you said, and even if it wasn't Citizen Kane, even if it wasn't a great film, if you're an X-Men fan, I think that there are plenty of things about that movie that you're going to love. I mean, it's hard not to. It really does hit on a lot of nostalgia. The only thing that I would have loved more at that end credits, right after it shows all of the X-Men in their original costumes, is if we got the...
Yeah. That would have been great.
Just throw the 90s theme in there, and we're good to go. On a scale of 1 to 5, I think I would give it a 3 out of 5.
Okay. Not a bad one. Not a bad one. Go watch it. That's my suggestion.
Definitely.
So where can they find you?
Check me out on Be Terrible Movies on YouTube or BeTerribleProductions.com. Check out this guy. Through this whole week's content, he's going to be joining me for the podcast, so I'm looking forward to that.
Totally stoked, guys. Make sure you go over there and subscribe to him and subscribe to the podcast and everything. Thanks for coming on. This has been Zach.
And Jeremy.
Have a week.